Welcome to today's Munch and Learn webinar session with PIPcall. Thank you for joining us. For anyone who doesn't know, the Rail Innovation Group, which you are hosted by today, is an association helping startups and small digital companies in the rail sector. So today's topic is about SCART. We will be doing a webinar that covers the AI interface, the regulatory shift, what's happened in the rail industry that's caused a challenge for which PIPcall has met, why they built SCART. We're going to do a demo later on, and then there will be questions and discussion. The questions, because of Zoom, it's a little bit difficult. If you have a question, feel free to email info@railinnovationgroup.com. That's info@railinnovationgroup.com, and I will read them out at the end. But I'm very excited about today because essentially it's a challenge, it's an AI solution, it's a tech company, so it ticks all our boxes, and we're very, very happy to go through this and learn about it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Andrew, who's going to lead the first session.
Afternoon all. My name's Andrew Bale. I'm a consultant in the telecoms sector. I've run telecoms companies for many years and worked for some of the largest telecommunications companies in the world. What I've been asked to talk about is what's going on in artificial intelligence. We hear it all around us, and there are some very good case studies of businesses, markets, applications that have been transformed by AI. A few years ago, RSSB did a first analysis of what might happen in safety critical communications with the advent of AI, and that was provided as a paper, a white paper T1261. We'll talk a little bit about that. But first of all, I want to look at a couple of case studies in adjacent markets to the rail industries, where organizations have not just been able to do what they're normally doing a little bit better, but one of the big themes of AI is, can we do things that we couldn't historically have done? Just as the computer transformed our ability to produce documentation, material, new ways of working. AI is producing new opportunities for doing things that we could never have done before. We didn't have the manpower to undertake them. So JP Morgan, for instance, a project called Coin. Historically, commercial loan agreements were made. 12,000 commercial agreements were made in a year. And if they'd had to do a deep review of the cross correlation between all of these commercial loan agreements, it would have taken hundreds of thousands of lawyer hours. Their analysis was that JP Morgan would have needed 360,000 new lawyer hours to undertake a proper review of all commercial loans passing over their desks. With AI, they were able to do a triage of all of those documents, bring together all the salient points from them with near zero error rates. And that beat human review, not only from the point of view of removing 360,000 very expensive lawyer hours, but actually the quality was better because it was highly repeatable, always did the same thing. Similarly, also in financial services, but closer to the market we're talking about today, Fiserv is another financial services organization, and they have many voice conversations with their clients, and those conversations must be compliant. Similarly to Ops 301, anyone who's undertaking a conversation with a client needs to say the right things in the right order to be compliant. Historically, they were doing occasional monitoring of calls. Under 1% of calls were able to be monitored, somebody listening in, checking that the agent was using the right language. AI overnight transformed that to 96% coverage. No added headcount, industry-wide, compliant, comprehensive quality assessment, and their compliance issues in their contact center went down by 50% in the first year. They stopped sampling and they started seeing everything. So T1261 looked at what AI might do for safety critical communications. And this was in 2023. Doesn't sound very long ago, but actually, there have been enormous changes in the capabilities of AI in the time since then, the 3 years since then. First of all, they already identified that automated review of safety critical communications has the potential to drive assessment far better than manual review, mainly, again, similar to the Fiserv example, because of the ability to cover all calls. They already identified that the open source models, the models that you can run on your own machine, run within a cloud-based platform under your own control, already beat the commercially paid options. But they needed Rails-specific training data, which is now finally starting to come through. Most SCC criteria were low to medium complexity to automate and very much within the capabilities of AI, even in those days. But now, AI systems have improved enormously, both in quality, in pace, and costs of inference have dropped through the floor. Inference costs since 2023 have reduced 280-fold, 280 times cheaper to do inference at scale. We've got 7 times more training data available. Reasoning scores for being able to do the natural language processing since 2023 have jumped through the roof. They're 5 to 10 times better than they were in those days. And open weight models, these models which, again, you can run within your own environment, are within 1.7% of the best closed models like ChatGPT and Anthropic's core Claude. All of that is critical to rail deployment. Keep the data within secure environments, run high quality automated speech recognition using best available models, and identify the accuracy with which the agent has, with which the person on the call has used safety critical language. But again, the most critical thing, AI is ready to ingest all calls at all times and give us an accurate view on the individual conversations compliance to RSSB standards. The technology is ready to go.
So, just to give a bit of context in terms of how PIPcall came into the industry and really explain what our approach is to the industry in terms of how we go about providing the solution that we have and how we build on top of that. So, PIPcall's been in the telecoms industry for about 15 years. And roughly about 1 year ago, we stumbled across NRL2 or L3 Ops 301. This was a per chance conversation I had with a principal contractor that actually saw our call recording capabilities. And one of the things that I asked was, what is the reason behind all of this regulation? And it came down to the fact that there's a statistic out there that says 21% of all accidents that happen trackside comes down to a communication breakdown or people not following communication protocol. So this is something that we were interested in, but we didn't understand yet whether our product or our solution is fit for purpose. But upon reading and studying the regulations, we actually saw that what we've built wasn't specifically to the industry, but it was perfect fit for the industry. From an Ops 301 perspective, all the boxes can be checked in terms of a call recording piece. We use the mobile voice network rather than VoIP, which provides a much better, stronger, resilient connection to that call, and obviously store that information centrally. And while doing all of this, we had to familiarize ourselves with the industry. We've been to pretty much every single event in rail. We've spoken to the RSSB, we've spoken to Network Rail, we've spoken to all the stakeholders, including RECA, as well as principal contractors, tier 1s, tier 2s, tier 3s, manpower suppliers, the lot. Through those conversations, we gathered a lot of intelligence. And there's one thing talking to people at senior level, but then there's also talking to somebody that's on ground level and understanding how this can impact somebody's role. Because as you probably know, people at ground level, there are concerns around call recording. They do worry about whether this is of benefit for them or if it's a big brother type solution, which it is not. But having spoken to and having met the person that I want to speak next, is a gentleman called Miles Alcock. And Miles is somebody that has over 10 years experience working trackside, has been in these situations, and has a story to share that I'm sure everyone can relate with in terms of why call recording itself is beneficial not only for the company but also for the individual. So Miles, if you would just go through your experiences and talk about what you've learned in that
Thanks,
process.
Colin. Yeah, my name's Miles Walcott. I've worked in the rail industry for like Johan said, for the last 10 years. Prior to that, I was in telecoms for about 20 odd years. My role in the rail industry has been more on the safety critical roles. I've done the roles for ES, PIPcall, MC, CARS, AP. And over the years, I've seen the incidents, happen. But following on from a rail investigation that I was involved in myself, the ES in question was myself at the time, and the ES assistant it was also involved in this. This was because of a miscommunication where he said this and I said that. This then led to an automatic drugs and alcohol testing and a full investigation using individual statements on from both of us. This could have been sort of avoided if we had been using call recording at the time, but we weren't. So obviously, it was just like I said, he said, I said, etc. So from that, I took some lessons that I learned from the experience of last year. And the first one is no record of conversations which lead to investigation statements taken. This would have been a lot quicker to investigate and concluded if we had been using call recording at that time. Recording of conversations would have proved any miscommunication between the ES, which was myself, and my ES assistant. Third one was a record of the conversation would have aided any training that may be required going forward with anything that's happened. Also, all parties in the two-way conversation are protected and covered of what's been said. This was obviously from my experience was that obviously it led to just both myself and my assistant just making statements. So if it had been recorded, it would have been really good because obviously it would have been played back and I would have probably cleared myself straight away. And lastly is regarding the AI SCART platform. I've had a look at that over the last few weeks, and obviously I'm quite impressed because this would enable lessons learned from communications and highlight any training requirements going forward. Um, and that's about it, really. So I'm going to hand back to Johan.
Thank you very much, Miles.
Thank you.
If we can move to the next slide then. And so now, this is really why we actually brought everyone here today, is just to understand why did we actually build SCART and what is the purpose of SCART within this industry. So as I said, we've been in the industry for 1 year. We've collected a lot of data by speaking to all the different stakeholders within the industry. And one of the common concerns that came up time and time again is, one thing is having your call recordings in place, and that's fine. We tick that box, but what do we do with that call recordings and how do we utilize that to improve safety overall and improve communications within teams? The challenge that we have at this stage is, without something like SCART, manual assessment, the biggest concern around that would be the effort that it would take to do this correctly and not just as a tick box exercise. Because as it stands, the regulation only requires a tiny subset of all calls to be evaluated and assessed and scored and then presented to your CRGs, less than 1%. And so with that level of, I guess, visibility on what's going on in terms of communication within your industry, there's not a lot of conclusions you can draw from that. There's not a lot of intelligence you can gain from that level of assessment. And so, a typical assessment that is done correctly can take between 15 to 20 minutes to go through the whole process of transcription, of grading the call, of assessing what needs to be improved, and giving recommendations and feedback, and also filling out the forms that are necessary to be presented to the industry. So if you have some of the organizations we've spoken to have 700 to 1,000 staff members that are working in trackside safety critical situations, that is a big challenge for them to think, I have to assess a sample of these people, and the amount of manpower and man hours involved in doing that assessment, it doesn't seem doable because of the effort and time it would take. So what we've been able to do is reduce the time it takes to make an assessment from the time that the conversation ends to actually doing the grading, the scoring, the assessment, the evaluation, the feedback, as well as filling out the documentation within less than 30 seconds. And why this is different is because there's a consistent normal in terms of how this is done. It's not something that fluctuates over time. There's no information bias, or there's no individual bias in terms of how people grade things. It creates an industry standard of how to assess and score things. We designed this really to build the bridge between ticking the box and just assessing 1% or less than 1% of calls and presenting that on an annual basis to your review groups, to actually providing actionable insights and trend analysis that will empower the health and safety teams or directors with the data that's necessary to really improve safety across the industry, across teams, across sites, and overall. And so for us, it was a no-brainer that if we can actually remove the perceived time and effort it takes and provide a consistent normal, that can only improve safety. And by assessing every single call over time, trend analysis appears. And that's where the value lies. It's when you can take action and you can provide feedback to teams, and you can see a steady trend of improvement across organizations. So the person that actually helped build this solution is a gentleman that has come from a communications background within the military. It's a person that has a lot of experience within telecoms, and also has a lot of experience within developing these type of models. So I want to introduce Paul and get him to speak a bit about the SCART platform.
Thank you, Johan. Okay, so what you're looking at is SCART. SCART is a SaaS solution that's hosted remotely. If you want access to SCART, you can either look at our website, PIPcall.com, or you can go to scart.pipcall.com and request a demo access, where we'll be in touch to set you up on that. What you are looking at now is our demo platform that we use to demo to customers and we use to test internally. So let's get straight to it. What is SCART? What you're looking at is the dashboard of SCART. This is the aim of SCART itself, as Johan has said, is to keep things as simple as possible. Roles within the rail industry are already complex enough, whether that be someone working on the tracks, or whether that be an assessor, or whether that be a manager. We've tried to make this as simple and as intuitive as possible. So how does it work? There's multiple ways that we can ingest conversations and calls into this. We can go through either pasting text. If you already have a call recording system that does a transcription, you can paste a transcription into this. You can upload individual files. They can be WAV files, MP4 files, MP3. You can also connect this to your existing call recording platform. So we can link that through and do a push and pull. You can also bulk upload for this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go straight into it to show you how it operates and talk through some of the benefits of the system itself. So if I select upload, I'm actually going to upload a conversation that was done between two trainers within the industry, and I'll do a good one to show you how that works and the rating that it comes back. So it takes a few seconds to connect and to upload. If we're connected directly to your call recording system, this can be done automatically post the call. So you won't even need to do this, and then you can just look at the review. As you can see, that's now uploaded. We then use a transcription service which transcribes the call. What we've done, we've trained our transcription services to understand rail terminology. So it knows what a PIPcall is. It knows what an ES is. It understands that terminology. We also use the current UK best in practice for regional dialogue, so it can understand the difference between a Glaswegian, a Brummie, and someone from London. So what you do, it runs through the assessment. Now, there's different templates that you can use on this because obviously each role has different functionality. If you don't select a template, it will auto detect the template for you. We then submit the assessment. What this does, it goes through our deterministic engine. This is based on the Ops 301 regulations and the RSSB training standards. So it understands roles, it understands what good looks like from a voice procedure perspective. It understands phonetic alphabets, etc. There's a lot of education gone into the system. As you can see, when it first comes up, it gives you a high-level overview. So you can see this call was between someone called Rand Smith and Fred Tomlinson, who's a signaller. It then cleans the conversation. We still see the raw conversation, but it cleans the conversation to ensure that the rail industry terminology is correctly analysed. Once it does that, you can then go into a full view. What this does, it breaks the call down from who made the call, who received the call, overall assessments of the call. The aim of this tool is not to be used as a stick. It's not there to say someone's not doing their job. That's one thing I must emphasize. This is about improvement of quality standards and identifying training gaps. So it doesn't just turn around and tell you if there's something being missed. It also tells you what people are doing well. Every call, every assessment is given an individual ID, and it's also linked between the member of staff or your colleagues, so it can keep a consistent grading. And I'll show you this later. You can see if they're improving in their standards, or if they're declining or staying average across the board. As and where also sites are called through, it will also create a site list. Again, I'll come on to that in a second. Yep. So as you can see, it breaks it into some key areas. It breaks it into the identification of themselves, their phraseology, how are they communicating, the repeat back, which we know is really critical within this industry. Every communication is a verbal handshake between two people. And the clarity of the conversation, also the closing. Those are the 5 key areas that it assesses against. It also assesses against non-technical skills. So are they actively listening? Are they challenging? Have they been assertive where they need to be if something's not being heard? Yeah. And then the ABC practice, which for those who are not aware, that's accurate, brief, yet clear, but professional. So it also grades on that. And you can see it says who's doing well, what's doing well. If there's an issue detected, it will tell you what's being detected, what it was expecting to see, and what it actually heard. Now, the system will be harsh, right? And the reason for that is, if you look at best practice, it says, for example, you should use the phonetic alphabet. So if a user turns around and says, rather than I'm an alpha Bravo, they use I'm an alpha banana. It will identify that. It won't flag that as critical as long as the repeat back is heard correctly. But it will flag them as they may need training on the phonetic alphabet, and I'll come on to that shortly. So this is one conversation. You can then look at your history of conversations. You can filter this down by time. So last 7 days, last 30 days, and you can again see the standards of where they're at. You can review this. Yeah. So if I wanted to review it, I can see it. What I can also do with this, it will automatically create a feedback form for the regional review boards for yourselves. So it will pull all of the grading that it's assessed through. It will do what's good, what needs work. Yep. It will automatically assign the assessor if you are signed in the system as an assessor and who it's through. This can be used for not just the regional assessment board, but it can also be used for internal training. So one-to-one feedback for people. We can also go in and look at my teams. So if you look at teams, it will record all your teams. It will show you work that they've done. It will show you the communication over time. If we look at names first, you can see them. Yep. We can select them to view them individually. We can see the amount of calls they've made. But what it will also do, if we've got issues with a role or an individual, it can create a development action plan. Now, this can be worked with it can work with their manager, or it can work with their supervisor or the health and safety advisor, where it explains why it's come up with these issues and the recommendations for training. And then as and when training is provided or refresher training is communicated, these can be closed down. And then we can say that that individual has completed further training. And where we can track this back on my team, and we go through, you can see here, we can start to look at the trend of the individual users. So are they improving in their scores? Is it declining? Are they staying stable? And we can start to analyze that over a period of time to look at who's good, who's improving, and obviously who needs further conversations around support. The other thing this can be used for, where you've got your top performers, you can start to look at where they are good, what they do well, and how they can help you as a business to help other people within the business to ensure the standards are met. We also have analytics in here. So as I say, you can look at individuals, you can look at their recent performance, their trending, but we go a bit deeper than that. We also go into, if it's on a shift pattern, how is our performance based on a shift pattern? How's our performance based over hours? How's our performance from days of the week? We can extend this into sites. If we want to look at, as part of the communication, as I'm sure you're all aware, people introduce themselves, their role, what they're there to do, where they are. You can start to look at communications for a whole site. So if I wanted to look at a site, for example, I can have a look at the conversations that have happened through that site, which is, for example, this one, possession requested, it was granted, the work commenced, there was no updates on this site, there was no shift handover, the work was completed, and the possession was handed back. And again, you can see the scores on that site, you can see the grades on that site, and you can individually review and go into them. The system will grade itself on the scores. If I select a score, it will grade itself on a percentage and a grade B. This is based on the Ops 301 regulations, where you get A through to D, but it will also add two additional grades. One is an X, and that is if it's detected that the call is not a safety critical call, you know, somebody's phoned them, it may be their partner, just saying that they won't be available for her, or they're working late. It will exclude that. The calls are not affected. It will exclude it and say it's not a safety critical call. It also gives a P grade. And what a P grade is that's where we think the system needs a person to actually review this. It could be because there's a misunderstanding of a communication. The system, you know, has noticed quite a major issue, but it's unsure if that's a safety critical item. So the individual and the assessor can go in and then individually score that system. As I said, this can be used automatically, manually. It is role-based access. So you can assign a team to a manager. So only they would see the people working for them and could grade and assess them. Yet as the super admin can see everybody. That is SCART as a whistle-stop tour.
Thank you very much, Paul. One thing I would add is just that at PIPcall, we have our in-house development team, and we are looking to the industry to also advise us on areas where we can add value. You know, one of the things Miles actually mentioned, Miles, what it was that you mentioned as well, where you think this could add value?
So I was just picking up on the presentation, Paul. So obviously this application can be used in a far wider than you've actually mentioned. So for instance, um, training with training assessors that operate within the rail industry. Obviously, cost briefings. That's something that we've already discussed that you could probably incorporate in some of the Network Rail application, Sentinel, et cetera, that we use. Obviously, contract audits. I get audited quite regular by my sponsor. So on a yearly basis, we all seem to have a phone call. We go through our skills and competencies, etc. So it's something again it could be used with the actual contractors where they can do them audits. And also, you could also be using this as employee audits as well. So, obviously, Network Rail could do to make sure that their staff are working as per specification, etc. But like I say, I think the key thing is training, assessments, cost briefing, and then contractor audits, which is something that you guys will probably take it to the next level.
We've spoken at a lot of the conferences as well, and met a lot of people that have told us that their companies specialize in management systems, et cetera, within rail, and has asked us if it's something that we could potentially collaborate with them as well. So there's so much scope for us to improve this model. Obviously, with machine learning over time, the system only gets better. And outside of rail, if organizations have other areas, we can even adapt this SCART model, feed it with a different set of rules, and adapt it to other industries as well. So, the sky's the limit here, what we can do with this. It's just, we need feedback from the industry to help us improve this. So that's one thing is if we can find partners that are willing to work with us and fine tune it, then we can create a custom-made model that can really fit around whatever requirements you might have as an organization. So we have that capacity, we have the teams to make the changes. If people want to work with us, that would be fantastic.
I think the other thing, just to add to Mark, to what I was saying, Johan, as well, is the main thing with this as well is when accidents do happen, and they do, we can learn from it, because when and in certain incidents, people go into a panic mode. So all things go through the window, all the phonetic alphabet, everybody gets a bit tongue tied, etc. But using that, looking at afterwards, you can learn from it and find out what happened, why did we do that, and again, it's instilling more, making sure we're doing the right thing going forward.
Yeah. And that's the difference, it's whether you are checking a box and presenting less than 1% of assessments to the CRGs to meet the criteria, or whether you're utilizing a tool such as this to actually improve overall safety and communication protocol within the industry. And that's really why we built this. Is the regulation has been put forth for a reason, and that's everyone's here to try and improve safety overall. But there is a gap between what is required by the regulation and what is possible, and this is how we fill that gap. I think if there's any questions, we can go to that.
If anyone does have any questions, as I said earlier, is just email info@railinnovationgroup.com and they will come to me. Two have come through already. So in the interest of transparency, I'm going to read the letters, but hopefully the person answering the question can include a description of what these letters mean. How does SCART ensure that different operational roles, such as ESs and COSSs, are assessed fairly and in the correct context? Let's take that.
Would you like me to take that, Johan?
Yeah, go for it, Paul.
Yeah. So, as we know, there's different communication skills based on infrastructure and electrical work, etc. that goes on. What we've done, we've educated a deterministic engine in there to the phraseology that is correct to those roles and those activities and the work that's being carried out, and it identifies with a high level accuracy the role that is being picked up. So that's when I showed you the template. Those are the different templates that are loaded in to understand those phraseologies, those understandings, and those roles and responsibilities. When we were first developing this, one of the interesting things that it picked up, and it was quite interesting. We had a really good communication review come through, but then it failed it, and I couldn't understand why. And it was because somebody was trying to hand a site back that wasn't allowed to hand the site back. And the system identified that, picked it up and said, the communication was fantastic. However, it's an absolute fail because they are not authorized to hand the site back. So with that, one of the evidence and the proof that it works, and that was a really nice feeling to understand that the system logic works. It understands the context, it reads it correctly, and it can identify. As you said earlier as well, Johan, with machine learning, this will get better as well. The more that we use it. Does that answer the question? I hope it does. I hope it does.
I'm going to assume it does because they're all muted anyway. The next question is separately is how do you see SCART fitting into existing competence management and assurance processes in rail? Who wants to take that one?
I'll quite happily take that. And Miles, actually, I'd like to sort of refer to yourself. I know the conversations we've had with people within the industry and talking about Sentinel, how that works, how the safe working practices work, etc. You know, if you look at the way rail has adopted technology over the past few years, it has moved from paper copies into sort of mobile devices already. You know, when people are going on sites, they're using their apps, you know, to do the pre-briefings. They're using that to do to do the checks and confirm that. I think this is a natural fit into this. As and when we establish more, we can link into these, and we would actually, I think we'd actually benefit some of them. And to Miles's point earlier, you know, the sort of the on-site morning briefs, that's something we could link in and work with companies alongside this. It's not to replace them. This is to enhance what we've done. It is to enhance the safety and security of people working on the tracks, and also giving companies who use that a defensible backing with what they do, showing that they actually can monitor, can perform improvements as and when needed, but also, you know, they can see where they're doing well. So for me, it's a working together, aligned with them, not a replacement. And I think it's a natural fit with things like Sentinel and the safe working practices.
I think also, just to add to that, Paul, obviously, regarding briefings, cost briefings, whether it's task briefs, etc., you know, the standard cost briefings to make sure that the information, the correct information is relayed to the individuals you're actually briefing out to. So obviously your platform would pick up on what's the ideal briefing and probably score people against that. Also, you're looking at task briefs as well. Again, it's just a case of how you perform into the ideal standard, you know, and is training required? Again, we're all going to make mistakes. We're only human, and AI is going to pick. You know, it's going to go for the, you know, what is perfect, etc. But again, I think it's a great tool that you can sort of measure against and look to achieve.
Yeah. I agree completely. And again, to Johan's point, the beauty of this is we haven't picked this up off a shelf and just put our logo on it. This is, you know, created solely by PIPcall. You know, we have our own development team that we want to sit and work and actually become, you know, a best practice, you know, for people working on the on trackside.
Great. I'm just checking any more. I think that was the question. Yes, that was the questions. No more from the attendees. Do you have any questions for each other? Or particularly is how do people get in contact with you?
So people can either look at our website, which is www.pipcall.com, or they can go direct to SCART, that's SCART.pipcall, PIPcall.com. And in there, they can click on the requested demo. What that will do, that will reach out to sort of Johan, who's our lead on this. He will reach out, see what they require, and we can set them up literally within, you know, minutes to do this. And they can start to run through their own, they can test this, put their own samples through, and they can have a look at the system.
Great. That was fascinating. It's also really good to see a good news story of someone developing to respond to an industry challenge with tech. So we love it.
Excellent.
I think that is us done. So signing out. Thank you very much for our speakers today.